ladies and gentlemen, summing up the situation, David talked about this development committee, he talked about the candidates committee. I have to tell you that all those positions are appointed. None of them are elected by the ordinary members of the party because the candidates committee is appointed by the party board and so is the development committee. So you have no say whatsoever. They're not accountable to party members in any way. And yet, they are so powerful. The Committee on Candidates is determining who should become Conservative members of Parliament. And in that process, when they become Conservative members of Parliament, they become members of the government. And in my view, what has happened is that over the last 20 years, since David Cameron took charge, we have moved more and more into a situation whereby the candidates are career-chasing Lib Dems in many cases, people who do not hold Conservative values. And I'll tell you a little anecdote. In 2006, the party board asked me to look into the situation about women candidates, because there was a lot of criticism about the A-list that David Cameron brought in which constituencies were told what candidates they could have. And I investigated and did an investigation with Mike Baker and Derek Tipp, and we looked into the whole situation and discovered, to our surprise, but nevertheless it was the case, that the number of candidates that women put up was in direct proportion to, against the men as to the number of seats they were selected for. About 30%, roughly, of all candidates were women, and they were being selected in roughly 30% of all seats. And so I did the report for the party board and said that what you had to do was to address this situation as to why it was that women were not coming forward to be candidates, because if you could address that, then you would get a more equal balance. And so that report went in, the party board accepted it, and I saw David Cameron, and just after the party board meeting, and I said that, you know, in the report that we should drop the whole A-list situation, but concentrate on finding out why women didn't want to be candidates. And David Cameron said to me, he said, John, he said, thank you for your report. He said, you know, I only brought in this 50-50 in A-list, he said, because I wanted the women's vote in the leadership election. And I thought to myself, part of my language, what a cynical bastard you are. I didn't say that to him, but I thought that really sums up politics. Anyway, there's two further points that I would... It's
not true that he's cynical.
Just about, right. One other point, a very important point, was that prior to the Political Parties Referendums Act of 2001, every constituency, when a general election was called, had to hold an adoption meeting for their candidate to be the candidate. And the reason for that was because from that date, election expenses had to be accounted for. With the Political Referendums Act, the whole way in which election expenses were accounted for was changed, and you no longer had, it was no longer dependent on there being an adoption meeting. And so, to my great sadness and surprise, gradually constituencies have stopped holding adoption meetings when a general election has been called, and in particular, they have stopped doing it where there is a sitting Member of Parliament, and Central Office has allowed the situation where a sitting Member of Parliament, if his executive agrees, he can just continue as the candidate without it going to the party members. That is not democracy. At every general election, the members in an association should have the right to decide as to whether their candidate goes forward or not, whether they're sitting an MP or not. One other thing is that, of course, once these people have become candidates, then Central Office organise all these training courses for them. And we're told that they have online lessons in emotional intelligence, best practice, resilience, building of teams, diversity and inclusion on race, gender, reassignment, sex discrimination, sexual orientation. They have a significant problem with minorities, white resentment, and white employee diversity. All this stuff is now being imposed by these training sessions that Central Office are organising for their candidates. It's 1984, you know, really. That's where we come to. You know, the mind setting of the candidate, and that then affects how they go forward. Final point, which we haven't touched on, but which I am working on at the moment, is the situation regarding the selection of local government candidates. Because I'm afraid to say, gradually what has happened is that the rules have been changed, and it's a bit of a nightmare, because in the party's constitution there are 2 paragraphs relating to the local selection of candidates. And one paragraph says the party board will decide on the rules and tell the constituencies what they are. The rules get changed pretty well every single election. The members have no say, no discussion in those changes in the rules. They just have to accept what's laid down by the party board, and that's it. That is not democracy. In other words, the constitution gets changed by these hierarchy of people, unelected, unaccountable, and the members have no say whatsoever in what is happening. And over the years, the rules on the local selection of candidates have changed, and they've changed quite considerably, so that we've ended up with many members of the party basically consisting almost wholly of councillors and their families. And the end result is that many, many councillors have become chairmen of constituency associations. That, in the 80s and earlier, was very much frowned upon. Councillors were regarded as the political voice of the local association and were not the organisation body. And as a political voice, they were accountable to the association for what they did. If you have got a councillor who's also the constituency chairman, who is he then accountable to? Himself or herself? And that is wrong. And it's a very difficult situation. Because of the decline in membership, we have now got very, very small numbers of members. We've got very small executive councils. And we've ended up in a situation whereby the chairman is often a councillor. They will be able to manipulate so that they can get 5 people to become the approvals committee for candidates. They will put in their sister-in-law, brother, whatever, so that they control the whole approval of candidates and sitting councillors, and they can kick sitting councillors out or bring their mates in, whatever, at that approval stage, and then we get the same situation arising at selection stage as well. And this is an issue that has got to be addressed. It can't continue. And it has much bigger ramifications than locally. It is no surprise anymore that a third of all our candidates now are former councillors. And it's because this whole selection process, locally and regarding the Westminster Parliament, can be manipulated because of the few people that are involved. on sifting committees in particular. And I was proposing that a sifting committee should be at least 10 strong and should be elected by the Executive Council, so that we, at least we try to cut out this kind of mates and relatives being appointed and controlling it. So that's what we want to do then is for, and we passed at our conference, the CDO conference, that constituency associations should have the right to determine who their Conservative parliamentary candidate is, with minimum interference by CCHQ. And this includes both selecting and deselecting candidates and selecting or deselecting their Member of Parliament. Any member of the party should be able to apply to be a candidate. And local candidates, i.e. those resident in the constituency, should be invited for interview by the Executive Council as well as other applicants. And where a constituency association passes a motion of no confidence in their MP in a general meeting, they should be immediately able to start the process of selecting a new parliamentary candidate. CCHQ should have an advisory role in, for the conduct of due diligence, which must be carried out before the candidate is finally elected. There will be safeguards for constituencies where membership is below 150 members, but this measure would restore the autonomy of constituency associations and would take the party back to the situation prior to 1998 when the new constitution was implemented. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's what we're proposing we should take forward. And I would just say, finally, make these points. I believe that by making the party more democratic, then we will create a party that believes in conservative principles and conservative values. There is a huge gap now between the parliamentary party and the membership of the party. We saw that with questions like HS2, we saw it with Brexit, where 70% of the members wanted out, but 70% of MPs, conservative MPs, wanted to stay in, caused all kinds of problems. We've seen it with the issue of petrol vehicles and diesel vehicles, and fortunately Rishi Sunak has now extended that point to 2035. So we want to see, we want to move back to those conservative values, free markets, free trade, minimum intervention by the state, low tax, and a society based on reciprocal rights and responsibilities. And Graham Thomas has drawn up kind of objects and values for the party, and respect for law and order and strong defence. And we've forgotten these principles. We now have regulation poured onto regulation, poured onto even more regulation, whether it be equality, equal pay, minimum wage, living wage, labels on cigarette packs, labels on drinks, how much sugar we eat, whether we use plastic straws. Hayek, in his Road to Serfdom, explained that at the end of the road, after regulation has been imposed on regulation after regulation, you end up with a totalitarian state, tyranny, and dictatorship. If we don't change, I can see that end of the road. We are sleepwalking, if we're not careful, into disaster. So now, before it is too late, we have got to reform the Conservative Party, and we have got to bring in the reforms that Conservative Democratic Organisation is pushing forward, and I hope and believe that will be of great benefit, not only to the members of the party, but to the people of this country, because it will help us to get back a Conservative government. Thank you very much.